without further ado, please help me welcome Patrick Renvoise.
Thanks, Christine.
You're welcome.
Good morning. So what if you could discover the buy button inside the brain of your customers? What if you could leave this room today with a scientific model to do that? And what if all it took to get to that buy button was the answer to 4 simple but critical questions? Would that be worth your time with this conference here today? Yes? Great. Well, good morning again. My name is Patrick Renvoise. I am French. Nobody's perfect, right? I'm actually a French nerd. I studied computer science, and I got my master's from the sister university with the MIT. And I spent my life selling supercomputers, very expensive machines. I was with Silicon Graphics down in the Valley for many years. And I'm a nerd, so I read a lot, and I have 2 passions. One of my passions is selling complicated stuff, and my other passion is the human brain. So about 15 years ago, I had an aha moment one day when I read one of those books about the brain. Because if you look at the world of the scientists there that study the brain, they have a really good understanding of how it works down there, right? But we in the business world, we make all these assumptions about what our customers do, who they are, and how they think, etc. And that aha moment led me to believe that, indeed, there is a buy button inside the brain. So I was looking for that buy button. It took me 2 years to find out what the neuroscientists say about it. And the 4 questions that I'm going to leave you with, by the way, it's easy to understand the questions, but do not think that it is easy to get the answers to those questions, right? So I don't want to oversell and underdeliver. I believe that to find that buy button, you need to answer 4 questions. And the questions are, what are the pains inside the brain of your customers? The word need and wants, not interesting. It's all about pain. The second question you need to answer is, what are your claims? In other words, what are the unique attributes of your solution that can eliminate the pain in the brain of your customers? Then the third question is, what will they gain? In other words, you're going to take them from a painful situation, you will bring them to a less painful situation, and that delta, we will call it the gain. And at the end of the day, I believe that it's all about how you deliver then your message to the primal brain or to the reptilian brain, right? So 4 critical questions. I have only a limited amount of time, so it's going to go really quick. Get ready, guys, all right, to drink from the fire hose. And I'd like to spend these first 30 minutes now to explain to you that we are primates. In other words, we're still primal. We act like reptiles. So I'm going to spend 30 minutes to demonstrate to you that when you're thinking of marketing, you're probably looking at the wrong portion of the brain. So my first question to you is, are you putting your customers to sleep? In other words, when you communicate to your audiences there, are you really getting them excited? And if not, I'm going to suggest that, yes, indeed, there is a science that will help you capture their attention. Yes, indeed, there is a science that will help you convince them. And yes, indeed, there is a science that could help you close. Again, the key word here is science. In other words, I am not a guru. I'm a scientist, right? So if I tell you something that you don't believe, then catch me later and tell me, Patrick, this was BS. And hopefully I'll be able to give you an answer, a scientific answer to that. If not, I will go and look for it. Now, in my experience, spending years in Silicon Valley here, I've looked at how people try to convince. And this is the picture that I'm using, right? In other words, the way we try to convince our customers is by splashing our message over their brain, and then we hope that they get it. But as we all know, it's not very effective, right? Do we all agree that this is what most companies do? Instead, what I'm going to suggest is there is a way to concentrate your message, concentrate your value prop, create a nectar of it, and then find a way to inject that message directly into that section of the brain here, which is called our primal brain or reptilian brain. It's also called the first brain. And that is the essence of persuasion. In other words, most people believe that persuasion is about using logic to convince people. Trust me, it does not work, right? So let me start by saying that traditional marketing, which has attempted to do this, does not work. Now let me repeat that. I know I'm at my marketing conference, right? And you guys are the experts in insights. But I'm telling you, looking you right in the eyes, that marketing does not work. Why? Because this is what we do in traditional marketing. We take our customers and we ask them, what do you want? And then based on their answers, we're going to build a product, and later we will build a strategy to sell that product, right? But do you know what is the fundamental problem with this approach? Why is it that it does not work? Come on, you guys, you're the marketing gurus of the world. people don't know what they want, right? So about 15 years ago, we started to see a new branch of marketing called neuromarketing. And what do we do in neuromarketing? We ask our customers, what do you want? But of course, we're not going to trust their answers because we know they don't know. Instead, we will go and measure directly on their bodies various physiological changes. And we know that those physiological changes are going to be a much better indication compared to their self-reported measures. In other words, when your customers are trying to verbalize what they want, they give you whatever answer. We don't care, okay? So in neuromarketing today, we're using 6 main modalities, and there are a little bit more, but I just want to summarize them to 6. And I want to give you a very quick idea of what this is all about. So they have very esoteric names. You may have heard of some of those, but I want to review them very quickly so that you understand. The first one is called the Implicit Association Test. How many of you are familiar with the Implicit Association Test? IAT? A few, great. Well, the idea here is you give people 2 concepts, like young and mature. You give them 2 other concepts, like fast and experienced. And by looking at how quickly they can associate one concept to the other, you can measure in milliseconds to what degree people have those biases. And of course, as you can imagine, when you're in marketing, it's truly important because if you're Apple, for example, if you're the CMO of Apple, to what degree would you be interested to figure out how people associate Apple with easy to use, right? Or with cool to use. So today, the way Apple does it, if you use traditional marketing, you ask your customers, right, on a scale from 1 to 10, how cool do you think Apple is? And people give you a self-reported measure, right? Here, instead, we can really peek inside the subconsciousness of consumers and get an accurate answer, okay? By the way, doing that test costs almost nothing. So it's not like you need any specific hardware. You don't need anything, right? It costs almost nothing to do that. The second technique that we use in neuromarketing is called facial imaging. Here's what we do is we infer what is the emotion that people are experiencing based on how they contract the 43 muscles on their faces. Right? Because as you know, it's easy to lie with your words. It is much harder to lie with your face. In fact, the software is so accurate that it can read micro-emotions. Micro-emotions are emotions that are displayed on your face for less than 1/20th of a second. Right? So even if you're the most amazing person that can read people's emotion, you cannot do it at 1/20th of a second. The software does it for you. Right? The next technique that we use is called voice analysis. Here we use very specific software that was originally developed by the CIA to interrogate terrorists. Right? And what the software does is it does a spectral analysis of the voice response. In other words, it looks at your tone of voice. In fact, the software works in any language. It does not understand what you say, but it understands how your tone of voice changes. And based on those changes of tone of voice, we deduct various emotions that your customers are experiencing. The next technique that we use is called biometrics. It used to be called the lie detector. There we measure the breathing rate of people. Sometimes we measure their electrocardiogram. We measure how electricity flows between their fingers. And then based on that, we extract a number of interesting variables for marketing. Like, are they lying, for example? Right? The next technique, by the way, they are organized in order of complexity and price. All right? So now this is starting to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit more expensive. The next one uses what's called eye tracking. As you know, eye tracking has been around for about 40 years. But about 15 years ago, we started to use EEG to look at the responses of people to various kind of marketing stimuli. And then those using a combination of both, we can deduct the emotion of people, we can deduct how motivated they would be to do something, and then we can deduct also how hard they are thinking, what's called the cognitive load. So I wanted to give you an example. So I took the homepage of this particular event, and I ran a subcategory of those software, which is called predictive eye tracking. In other words, you can even predict where the eyes of your customers are going to go on a web page. And this is the result of it. So I don't know if they knew it, but they did pretty well. In other words, if you look at the way this page is architected, the people are drawn to one of the most important places here, which is the registration button, right? So that gives you the intensity of staring of people in the first 7 seconds when they land on that page. Now, the software allows you to do even more. The software allows you to do a path track. In other words, you can see where they go first, so number 1 there. So they first focus on that area, usually typically for about 20 milliseconds, right? And then they go to point 2, which is the date. So this is register, the date. So again, we can deduct that this page is fairly well organized to help the people that are visiting that page to take an action. So the next technique we use in neuromarketing is called the MRI, or its little cousin called the functional MRI. And here what we do is we measure the amount of oxygen that is being consumed by various areas of the brain. And as you know, each area of the brain typically has a specific role, and we have a huge database of all these areas in the brain. And then by looking at the brain, we can deduct a number of things. So I wanted to show you an example. This is an ad there were two ads that were created by Southwest Airlines. On the first side, you have, a few connections where they go in Chicago, and on the second ad, they have different balls traveling at different speed and whatever. And I'm going to show you briefly what that means. So this is the result, an average MRI of people that have watched the first ad, and this is the MRI for people that have watched the second side. So although you would need to be an expert in neuromarketing to interpret this, but I wanted to make sure that you understand you can really see what's happening inside the body of people when they respond to a specific marketing stimuli. So a lot of the research that we do is not public. In other words, a lot of our customers don't even want us to publish what, the result that came up with. But we did a survey, we did a research for Facebook a couple of years ago, and that survey is public. So if you guys are interested in learning more about some of these neuromarketing techniques, you've got the URL. You can go and look at what it looks like. Now, that particular study was done to study the difference of impact when you look at an ad on a phone versus of you looking at the same ad on your TV. And the conclusion was actually kind of startling because, as you can imagine, when you're looking at the ad on your phone, the image is very small. Right? When you look at it on your TV, it's much greater. So we could imagine that the ad on the TV has a greater response on your brain than the ad on your phone. But guess what? We found the exact opposite. And we have two interpretations for that. One is called Proprioception, which is the capacity of your body to know where it stands in space. So when you're looking at your phone, you're holding your phone like this, and it's sending a signal to your brain you're doing something important because your arm is in a certain position, right? When you're looking at the TV, your arms are all over the place. And then the second interpretation for that result is that people have an emotional connection with their phone, right? Some people love their phone. They don't love their TV. So anyway, if you're interested in learning more, you can go and check that particular page. Now, as all this research was, as we are making all this research available, we at SalesBrain, we published the first map or the first model that explains what your customers do with their brain before they decide. So I'm going to show you a picture of that map. And of course, the objective of the map is to help you point towards the buy button at the end, but you're going to have to walk a long way. So I'm going to spend the next 17 minutes here to tell you about this particular thing here called the three brain. In other words, I'm going to demonstrate to you that you guys are not making rational decisions. Okay? In other words, the whole purpose of this presentation is to tell you that we are reptiles. And then, if you guys are interested in learning more, I have two other sessions later on, so we're going to start going into the model, okay? But again, this map is not based on vaporware. It's been inspired by a number of books. Any of you read any of those books? Yes? Which one did you guys read? Blink? Now, that's a good one, because that's the easiest one to read, okay? It's a great book. It takes 2 hours to read it. Very interesting concept, right? The author talks about the fact that we make blink decisions, we make instinctive decisions, we make them typically really quick, and the good news is it tells us is 80% of the time it's the right thing. The problem is it doesn't tell you what to do when you make the 20%. Now, my favorite book in the list is the very first one, but it's also the hardest book you will ever read. In other words, it's PhD plus level reading, okay? You've been warned. But I'm going to talk more about that very first book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So let's see what I have learned in 25 plus years of studying the brain. I've learned that when your customers decide, they don't use one brain. They actually use three brains. And the first section of the brain that we use when we decide is located here. It's the outside, the wrinkly, pinky part of the brain. It's called the Neocortex. And the job of the Neocortex is really to help you process all the rational aspect of the decision. In fact, this is what gave our name to our species, right? We're called Homo sapiens, which means the one who know they think. Actually, our real name is Homo sapiens sapiens, which means the one who know they think. Knowing and thinking is the same word in Latin, okay? But guess what? This part of the brain is only a decision influencer. We have tons of scientific proof for that, right? And the first thing that you learn in sales is you need to sell to the decision maker. So if this is not the decision maker, why do we spend so much time, money, and energy trying to convince the logical brain? Now, the second portion of the brain is located here. It's called the middle brain. It's this part of the brain here you can see on my model. And the job of that brain is to give you your gut feeling. So first you go, what do I think about the decision? Then you go, how do I feel? But guess what? Neuroscientists have established beyond reasonable doubt that when we decide, we use the top of the stem and the portion that unite both hemispheres. Now, it has many different names. People call it the reptilian brain, the first brain, the old brain, the limbic system, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. What matters is we use the most ancient part of our brain to make all our decisions. And of course, there is a good news and there is a bad news, right? The bad news is we decide at the level of a crocodile. I mean, how many times have you seen it, right? How many times have you been in a situation where you knew you had the best solution for your customers, right? And it took you 20 years of experience to get to that conclusion. And then guess what? Your customers decided to buy from one of your competitors. And at that time, you probably said, they did not get it, right? That's what we say when we lose a client. And we say, they just didn't get it. Right? But it's not that they didn't get it. It's that your message was not appealing enough to their instinctual brain. Right? So what I'm going to suggest is that, yes, indeed, there is a way to completely redo everything you're doing in sales and marketing to specifically appeal to the instinctual brain inside the skull of your customers. So again, I'm not the only one who thinks that way. Daniel Kahneman was a professor of psychology at Princeton. And although he studied psychology, he received the Nobel Prize in Economy in 2002 for his work. And his work is summarized in that book. It's a fantastic book, but again, I warned you, it's a very complicated book, okay? And here is what he says. He says, we have two systems in the brain, system 1 and system 2. System 1, by the way, in my jargon, I call it the primal brain, right, or the reptilian brain. System 2 is the neocortex. And I'm going to summarize this book in 4 words for you. Here is what he came to conclude. He came to conclude that system 1 still rules today. In other words, we're in 2017. We think we're rational decision-making machines, but we are not. So let's make sure we understand the brain so that you guys can improve your marketing. So I want to contrast system 1 and system 2. So these are some of the attributes of system 2, okay? This is the slow brain. In other words, this brain is where you can solve nonlinear differential equations, okay? By contrast, the reptilian brain, or system 1, is the fast brain. And amazingly enough, guess what? To decide, we don't use our smart brain, we use our stupid brain, because it's the fast one. Now, why do you think that we use our fast brain to decide as opposed to the slow brain? Say again? Correct. It's because speed is more important for survival than smarts. And a proof of that is a fly survived only with 20,000 neurons in its nervous system. 20,000 neurons, by the way, is nothing you can really show off with, right? I mean, you can just be a fly. We, by contrast, we have 80 billion neurons in our brain. So our brain is vastly more sophisticated than the brain of a fly. But the fly survived not based on the quality of its decision-making. The fly survived based on how quickly it will escape your hands. So fundamentally, we are wired to make quick decisions, not smart decisions. Now, the system 1, or the primal brain, is much older than the neocortex. It's about 100 times older. By the way, just to give you an idea of the scale here, Homo sapiens is much younger than that, right? We as a species, do you know how old we are, the species? By the way, the number just changed about a month ago because they did a new discovery in Africa, right? We are about 300,000 years. So we are a very young species, right? When you compare all these numbers with how long we've been around for only a flicker of time, right? However, the brain that we use to decide is ancient. It's a brain that's 500 million years old. Now, it's a brain that doesn't deal with time very well. It's a brain that lives in the forever present. Now, the experts call that the immediate experience. And the immediate experience, right, is a rolling window of 7 seconds. Right? Because anything else that requires to think about the past or project yourself on the future is too complicated for the reptilian brain. And that explains, for example, why we have a hard time to save for retirement. Why? Because your retirement is never in that 7-second window. Make sense? All right. Now, system 1 is always on. Now, why do you think that the brain that decides is always on? Guess why? Because if a bear enters your caves when you're asleep, you'd better do something about it, right? Or if you're a nursing mother and your child is crying at the other end of the house, you'd better wake up to feed your child, otherwise you will disappear. Now, it's a brain that doesn't deal with very high-level capabilities. It's all about vigilance, fight or flight, freeze kind of syndromes. It's a brain that does not like anything new. It's a brain that loves familiarity. It's the brain of routines, right? Because guess what? If anything changes in your environment, it could jeopardize your survival. Now, it's a brain that is completely automatic. It's a brain of the unconscious. Let me give you an example of two actions that will require one or the other brain. Now, when you read the newspaper, for example, which system are you using? System 1 or System 2 when you read your newspaper? System 2, right? I mean, reptiles cannot read the newspaper. What about riding your bicycle? System 1, right? In fact, bears and some monkeys can ride bicycles, right? Now, do you realize that you can ride your bicycle and read the newspaper at the same time? It's because those two brains work in parallel, right? So think about System 1 as the operating system of the human body. It's the one that controls your body, your temperature, your breathing, your digestion, all that, all the subconscious processes, right? Even breathing. I mean, breathing, for most people, we don't think about breathing. It's automatic, right? That's the job of System 1. However, that System 1 is still the one that controls the decision-making process. By the way, do you realize also that most sports is about making, when you learn a new activity, you have to use your System 2. So it's really hard to learn a new skill, right? I mean, try learning tennis or golf. It's very hard. You're thinking about all you do. And to become an expert at any sport, it's about transferring what you're doing from System 2 into System 1. Because that becomes automatic, and you become excellent at it. Does that make sense? All right. And then finally, there is no way you can control System 1, right? In other words, if I tell you, don't panic, and you guys see smoke coming out of the window there, guess what? Everybody's going to run, right? Now, do you realize that we have bazillions of scientific proofs today to say that the brain that decides is the left column, not the right one? So I am asking you, as the experts in the world of marketing, what are you doing today to satisfy that section of the brain? Because I am willing to bet that most activities that you are driving today, they are focused on System 2. Yes? Yes or no? Come on, be honest. All right. So in fact, we are so irrational that scientists published list of our irrationalities. Now, I know you're not going to be able to read it. It's called the cognitive biases. That list is dated because it keeps changing. We keep discovering new biases. In other words, we keep discovering how we make reptilian decisions, how we're reptiles. And there are 188 of them, and it's super complicated. People don't even agree on their classification and all of that, right? But I am here to tell you that it's all because of our reptilian brain. And I'm going to illustrate it now. I'm going to demonstrate to you that you guys are reptiles. So we're going to do a series of quick experiments. I want everybody to focus with me, right? The first experiment has to do with your eyes. It's kind of an optical illusion, if you want. The question is, between the square labeled A and the square labeled B, which one is darker, which one is lighter? Come on, give the answer. A is darker. A is darker. That is not the right answer. The right answer is A and B are exactly the same color. In other words, if we bring a spectrometer and we measure the intensity of the gray in A, and we measure the intensity of the gray in B, they are exactly the same value. And you don't trust me, right? So I'm going to have to prove it. So I'm going to prove it. I'm just pressing a button. I'm bringing a single shade of gray here. Look, I'm not cheating, okay? I'm not changing anything else. So when I remove it, everything in your brain tells you A is darker than B. Then when I show it to you, yeah, they are exactly the same gray. Now, of course, this was designed by a bunch of very smart guys at MIT who are expert in the field of human perception, right? But when you know the working principle of that primal brain, you can mess with it. It's going to get weirder and weirder, by the way. All right, so let's see how you guys are good in math, all right? So you have to do this really quick, and I want everybody to shout out loud the answer to this question. Ready? Here we go. A cookie plus a candy is $1.10. The cookie is $1 more than the candy. The question is, how much is the cookie? Quick! Okay, how many of you said $1? And that was the wrong answer. Now, the right answer is, it's 105 plus 5 cents equal 110 differences. Now, did you notice how your fast brain wanted you to jump on the wrong conclusion? That's your reptilian brain in action, yes? It's going to get weirder. Now, this one is directly extracted out of the work of Daniel Kahneman, so that got him the Nobel Prize. That's one of the simplest experiments that Kahneman did. You guys have to make a bet, and you have two options. So you cannot not play, okay? First option, you can win 5 grand, or we can flip a coin, and you can win twice as much, or you can win nothing. Now, from a statistical perspective, everybody understands that they are the same, yes? All right, so, but you can vote freely. Who votes for option 1? Raise your hand if you vote for option 1. Great. Now, Kahneman found that approximately 90% of the population would vote for option 1. Great. But now, this is where it's going to get interesting. I'd like you to make another bet now, and you can either win or lose 5,000 for sure, or we can flip a coin, and you can lose a little bit more. All right. So you guys have to vote. It's not like you cannot vote, all right? So who votes for option 1? Very few people. Who votes for option 2? Guess what? Kahneman found that about 90% of the population would vote for option 2. By the way, those of you who vote the opposite is because you studied mathematics too much, but I don't trust you. If you were really facing that option, I would bet that you would vote differently. Now, it doesn't make sense. Look at this. We are completely non-symmetrical. Now, by the way, do you know how this phenomenon is called? The risk adverse, yes, they call it that way, but the actual scientific name is the loss aversion bias. Loss aversion bias. In fact, Kahneman is so smart that he was able to quantify the loss aversion bias. And you know what the magic number is? The magic number is 2.3. Now let me explain what that 2.3 means. Now imagine I am trying to sell this object here to you, okay? Now imagine this object is worth $2.3. If we were deciding with our neocortex, logic would say that if I give you $2.3 of value, you would be willing in return to give me $2.3, right? They would be willing to pay 2. But because of the loss aversion bias, in other words, the negative emotion that you will feel by having to open up your wallet and give me $2.3, right, is such that you're expecting to receive more value than you would normally expect to get, right? So what that means is if this is worth $2.3, your brain is telling you you only want to pay $1 for it. That's the loss aversion bias, right? And that explains why the 50% discount is so effective. Why? Because when you give 50% discount to your customer, it's the flip side of 2.3. By the way, that also explains why it's so hard to sell, right? Do we all agree that it's hard to sell? It's very hard. Why? Because if you're selling something which is worth this, your customer is always expecting to receive 2.3 times that amount of value. So even if you're selling a Fiat, right, your customer is not expecting to get a Fiat. He's expecting to get a Porsche for whatever they put, in it. Does that make sense? Right, so bravo, you have discovered one of the cognitive biases here. So if I zoom, we've explained the loss aversion bias. We still have 187 to go. And by the way, don't ask me what the IKEA effect is. You're going to have to come to the next session if you want to know. That's the last one that was found, by the way, the IKEA effect. All right, let's do another experiment and check how predictable you guys are. Ready? Here we go. You're going to have to do some math, so everybody take a piece of paper and a pen. Come on, let's go. Hurry up. Everybody take a piece of paper and a pen. All right, you only are going to have 5 seconds per line. So you're going to have a series of exercises. We're going to start by a little bit of math to get your brain going. And then I'm going to ask you an unrelated question, but you have to give an answer really quick because you only have 5 seconds per line. Ready? Here we go. If you're not ready, you're just going to catch up. The first question is, what is the result of 4,096 multiplied by 2? No, I don't want to hear it. I want you to write it down. Now, I'd like you to compute 8,192 multiplied by 3. Don't use your calculator. Now, write down the name of a tool. You have to write it down. Write down the name of a color. And stop. So now, again, to do this exercise properly, you have to write it down. If you just thought about it, it's not as effective, okay? But I'm asking you, what do you think is the probability that, let's say, about 30 or 40 people in this room will have the same tool and the same color? All right, so by show of hands, raise your hand if you have either a red or a blue hammer. Raise your hand if you have either a red or blue hammer. See, I want everybody to see what we have in the room here. We have an incredible amount of red and blue hammers, right? Why? Because you guys are reptiles. Okay, so let's keep on going. I'd like to do a fifth experiment here. It has to do with reading. Now, we have to do this as a group, and I can only point to one of the screens, so I'm going to use that particular screen, okay? So here's going to go. We're going to have a list of words, and each word is written in one color. So I only want you to read out loud the color. Don't think about the word themselves, right? Tell me what is the color of each word. Now, don't be too optimistic, because the test has 2 sections. The first section is very easy, and then it gets hard very quickly, okay? So I'm going to point with the laser here. Everybody does this, and you do it out loud, okay? So I want to hear you shout. Ready? Here we go. Okay, come on. Red, black, green, blue, black, faster. Green, red, blue, brown, green. Great. You guys are doing great. This is where it's going to get much harder now. Here we go. White. Green, red, blue, brown, green. You guys suck. Now, did you see how much harder it was? Because I was asking your brain to do 2 things at a time, and all of a sudden your performance goes, okay. How about this one? So really quickly, you're going to have to read what's displayed on the screen, but it's only going to be displayed for half a second. Ready? Here we go. So did you see what was written? Okay, was it written New York in the spring? No, it was written NY in the spring, right? But that's not what was written. You guys were blind. You are blind to a very important little piece of the message. So I'm going to show it to you again. This is what was displayed. Now, did you notice that the was written twice? Yet you were blinded to it, okay? But that's your reptilian brain again. All right, let's do another experiment here. This is the last one. So I'd like you guys to think about a bright yellow lemon. In fact, this is a really nice and smelly lemon. And you're holding that lemon in your right hand, and in your left hand, you have a really nice and sharp blade. So with that blade, you are now cutting the lemon in half. So I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine having half a lemon on your right hand and a very sharp blade on your left hand. Now with that sharp blade, I'd like you to further cut a 1/4-inch slice of that lemon. So now you make the cut, and the cut is really nice and clean. So drop the knife. Just keep that slice of lemon and slowly bring that slice of lemon under your nose. So now I want you to start smelling the fragrance of that zesty lemon, okay? And now gently bring that lemon between your 2 lips. But don't bite into it yet, right? Just hold it there. And now take a deliberate bite into the meat of that lemon. Right? Now you're starting to feel the juice of the lemon reach the back of your teeth and the tip of your tongue, where some of your taste buds are located, right? And it's a very acid, but it's also a very juicy and a very sweet lemon. And now I'm asking you, what's happening in your mouth? Come on, open up your eyes. You're salivating, right? Now, did you have a piece of lemon in your mouth? Did you need to salivate? No, but guess what? By telling you a story of a lemon, I can make your mouth water. In other words, I can make your reptilian brain believe that you have lemon in your mouth when you don't. Okay? So that's the end of the first section of my presentation. And I would like to conclude this by, guess what? What can really stimulate the reptilian brain? Because I've been asking this question to myself for 20 years. And I will tell you that there are only 6 ways you can trigger that reptilian brain. So in my next portion, this is what I will talk about. But this is the end of my presentation. I wanted to make sure of one thing, though, is that everybody in this room is convinced that we are reptiles. Yes? Because if you don't, then I can spend 3 days to demonstrate further to you. All right? Well, thank you for your time. I hope I see you next.